As it says, people might still file in, so if you could just take the beginning of the session here, read through the first page of the handout. It kind of orients you to the session and what to do before we start getting together in groups to discuss things. My name is Serena Mershon-Lohkamp. I teach chemistry at Gogebic Community College. And so the session today, a POGIL-Inspired flipped classroom. So what you have in front of you is a handout that is in the style of the way I teach my class. And so you have the outcomes, what to do. That's, hopefully kind of try to run the session this way. That's what I would give to my students as well. And then the big bulk of this section of the session is focusing on what a lesson guide is and how to make them effective, as well as understanding how they fit in with the whole process. So this is written in the form of a lesson guide. It's teaching how I do the class. And so as you look through, you can see there's tips and things and about along the way. So normally a student would have this completed before coming to class. Again, the flipped classroom, they do the primary content outside of class and then come into class to work on the details. And so with, obviously in the session, that's not, we can't do that ideally. So hopefully you had a few minutes to kind of look through and recognize what at least is present there. Students, again, would typically have this done and worked through. And then we get in groups and discuss, go through the, they would go through the entire lesson guide, question by question. I wouldn't be giving them the right answers. They would be figuring out the right answers themselves, but I would be walking around to address those and make sure that people do have the right answers and interact with the groups. So again, I don't believe that we have time to probably go through this entire thing point by point and in a group. So what I would like for you to do as you get in groups is really just focus on these outcomes here for the session. Describe what is meant by POGIL and inspired classroom, what are some key features, and recognizing where flexibility exists in this approach. And then what is a lesson guide? What are the goals? What are the formats? And some best practices. And then as you're going through this, just kind of keep a list in your mind. This would work. This wouldn't. This is is applicable to my class. This is not, or I'm not sure how this would be applicable to my class. So think about those things. So as you go in your group, again, what I'd like for you to do is to begin as a group, first off, introduce yourselves, and then start going through those, review any responses that you've already come up with, and then begin articulating together your responses to those questions. I'll be coming around and interacting with the groups during this time. There will be a question and answer session and review at the end, just like I would do with the course as well. We're going to, ideally, we have groups of 3 or 4. Those of you who've done student groups before, you know that's usually the best number with what we have in here today. We're going to do a group of 2 and a group of 3, so we have a couple of groups. So if the 3 of you and the pair back there, like I said, just go through and try to address these outcomes, discuss the approach, what questions you may have, and again, I'll be walking around as well.
Are we moving on to page 3 to answer those questions together? Is that what we're doing?
So, just
together.
Yeah, together. No, together.
Yeah, more
really.
yeah,
And this is more addressing kind of more of the big picture ideas instead of the individual questions. If we have time, we'll go go through those as well, but kind of start with the more of the big picture ideas there.
So assign goals according to teacher.
Does somebody have any questions?
So if we're looking at kind of comparing when we look at POGIL-inspired classrooms, so define the title term, so we want to just go and define what we mean by POGIL-inspired.
Basically, what is POGIL and what is a flipped classroom?
Okay, and how are they different, how are they blended, probably?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's gonna make a great video.
POGIL-Inspired, you're given a packet you take with you, include outcomes for the lesson, which is test, which are the worksheets about each lesson.
So the POGIL part is that they're learning in groups when they come to class, but we need almost a flip classroom by
Right.
doing their lesson guide before they come in, and then they work together on it.
Yes, actually the POGIL part, the POGIL is, it's a worksheet done in class in groups. So it's not a flipped classroom.
Okay.
And so POGIL is instead of lecture, you teach through the worksheet in groups is what it's, so the content's delivered during the class.
Okay.
And yeah, chemistry people will be familiar with the POGIL. So.
So it's the
Where's it?
team part, and then the flipped is more the independent part, right?
Yeah, so there's POGIL, and then there's flipped
Right.
classrooms, and
You're gonna bring.
I brought those together.
Okay, that's good.
I didn't hear what you got here, did you want us to go into discussions?
I mean, kind of read through, I don't think answer the individual questions, but kind of recognize just because it's written in the style of the lesson guide, so that I think will help answer more of like the, and then the overall, you know, questions though, just more of the big picture ideas, but.
Okay.
Worksheets, charts.
Content primarily being delivered during our last week.
Scenarios.
So as I told you, actually, the POGIL part of things is very much a concept understood by the vast majority of chemistry people, chemistry teachers. It's been around for a while, so that's something that they would be a little more familiar with. But it's pretty much the content delivered during class in groups, and uses that idea of extracting the concepts from data instead of being told the concepts in a straightforward manner.
So problems done outside the class would be.
So the flexibility exists in how creative they can be in finding everything themselves. Can they use like internet? Can they use?
In the POGIL classroom, the way it's done, it's just like a worksheet, pretty much, and each of the individuals actually has assigned goals. There's a
It's not for you.
And,
She doesn't mean you.
Yeah, and it's usually a chart, data, something, and then the questions lead them through getting them to the principals.
Because we want to spend all our time away from school and everything.
Right.
Well, I don't know, maybe more meaningful to that, what we do in class, work and in class.
In the report out, what I'm actually going to ask you for is your answers to the outcomes, not the answers to the individual questions. Those are more there for when you leave, for you to go through and read more specifically and get more tips on how to make the lesson guides effective.
So we don't have huge about to start the lesson plans, explain the goals. That would be, the students would know, would be where what they should know and be able to do with the lesson material, then is that?
Sure. I mean, but I think maybe a little more long-term too is to kind of provide remote processing skills and develop, yeah.
Application.
Especially at first. Maybe it is, but I think it would be, at first, if, if you're not used to that, you're used to going to a lecture and just having somebody stand up and talk to us, and we've got, okay.
Yeah, how much resistance do you have at the beginning of the course versus how long does it take to get?
That's why
converted
the,
into this methodology?
yeah, that's why the student buy-in is a big thing. You have to be from the front, express enthusiasm, you believe in it, because it's there. And so after that first week though, they start to get a feel for it and they like it. There's always still some resistors, oh, I just wish you'd lecture. And then I tell them, oh, no, you don't. Because there is much more, and I just, relate my experience that definitely students do much better under this sort of system than just
They just kind of, oh yeah,
You get what I meant.
I think assigning specific roles is
You would be able to
important.
remember each other versus
That everybody has
Because they're-
some sort of outcome is
I mean, if
expected
there's
of them, no
something,
matter
that maybe
what,
was
which
an
could be very
experience that you
random based
had
on material.
related to it.
You don't have
So
to
that would be-
Right,
Yeah.
if you're not prepared on the team,
Equally,
then
and
essentially
you
you're
see
the
the
team that's not
deposit
prepared.
already, you said recently,
and
I think it's good.
continue to be
Yeah.
unprepared. I mean, really.
Yeah, the difference
Or you
are
can spend some
with us.
time preparing. Jump in.
I like the fact that they don't necessarily.
I guess that would be an interesting question to ask. What,
Yeah.
when you look at
Well,
this
that's the
format
point.
and how it's set up,
Look, when
how
you
to
Just to
handle
read outside,
those,
so you
yeah,
have some idea of what you're
continually,
But this pretty
or
much.
even
I
not just
feel
doing
like
something
everyone would
like
be coming up
complementary.
and have time to
what is their
You know what I
contribution
mean?
to the
So I
group,
wasn't
and,
prepared
are
before.
they,
I know what's coming.
is it a handout?
And this is exactly what I would do with my students. If the handout addresses it, I would come over and I would totally answer the question still, but I would point to where it is somewhere in the
So I guess the
lesson.
application of it is probably more scenarios. But I do want to.
Oh, actually, I think it's in the page that I address this one.
Student buy-in is important.
No.
Yeah, okay, so, this is where I address that. So definitely the, buy-in is huge with any things that we, for this, because they want just the lecture in the beginning, because they think, that's how they learn best.
Mhm.
We know differently, and so you just have to let them know. I believe in this. That's what you have to tell them from the beginning, that you believe in it, you know, when you've seen it work. And so, and then the unpreparedness for this, I make them work on their own, and then so they don't get that group benefit, but they get some of the homework points, so it's still worth showing up, because they're gonna get some of the homework points versus not coming at all. And then I'm there to help them through, and I make sure I go to them as well and ask if they have any questions and things like that. But pretty much people want to work in groups, and they don't want to have to sit off by themselves, and that peer pressure thing, and just, you know, plus the benefit, it's not just peer pressure as well, but it's the benefit, wow, if I get at least half of this done, I can get the answers from somebody else, you know, and I can talk about it, so I don't see too much non-compliance. I do give, part of theirs 5% of the grade is group work, or 2% of the grade is group work. And so pretty much though, if they show up and they do it, they get the 100%. You know, it's when they're absent or not prepared, or if they're not done, they start to drop as well. So I don't think that's as big of a deal to them. I think it's more about the getting to work in groups.
Is there enough flexibility in it so that if you get to a certain subject matter that is maybe more difficult, that you're really struggling with? You know, I mean, because it seems, you know, very structured, but does it throw you off? Do you have the time to, you know, I mean, as you're going through something, if they're just maybe not grasping it the way you want them to for some reason?
Yeah, I often will give a little mini lecture in that respect, and sometimes make another handout. They also, you know, there's also master chemistry, there's other things, but yeah. And this year I had that more, and I did have to do that partly because we missed so many days, which was kind of difficult to make up then. But yeah, I will do little mini lectures on it. I've made like, you know, addendum handouts or extra practice kind of things for the subjects that has seemed necessary for.
Yeah,
So,
from the students, you mean?
no, to us.
Oh, sure.
Did you guys have any more questions?
You just want us to kind of work through this part, right? Yeah, I think, yeah, we're pretty much looking at all our cons as pros, but.
Okay.
I think we're.
Okay. It seems like you guys have kind of worked through the outcomes in some way or not. Okay.
I think so.
So just take a couple more minutes, and if you haven't, you know, maybe read through some of the title headings and things a little bit more in the handout while we wait for everybody else to finish.
Look up here, because I think we're.
Okay, so a POGIL-inspired flipped classroom. So the POGIL part, how many people were familiar with POGIL prior to this? Hopefully in the other room will be a whole lot. So again, the POGIL is the structured group work, working through worksheets in class to get the content and develop critical thinking skills with that data-first approach, getting students to extract the concepts from data instead of just telling them. What did you notice any in here? What would be an example of a POGIL style question? Or I also had some actual examples from my class. Do any of you recognize any of those? Let's see here. So let's just kind of, would the, I had the dimensional analysis, okay, here, which I had said was done in the scaffolded. Is that helping them to understand what to do through figuring it out on their own, or is it telling them what to do? Would that be a POGIL or a non-POGIL kind of thing? Which contrasts with the one on the next page, the nomenclature of binary compounds, where they have data in the box when they're asked to devise the rules for naming. So that would be the POGIL, right? And so that would be an example of a POGIL. Like, here's some information. Okay, you know, how do you change the name? You know, how do you name it based on prefix and these sorts of things? And then at the bottom, what's the difference? What is a binary compound? Okay, can you recognize that? Versus this one over here, it is, you know, let's do dimensional analysis problems, and here's the process for doing it. And also the other example I gave, the bonding and compound types. This would be the just the lesson guide. There is no teaching in this. And these are pretty much asking questions based off what was in the lecture handout that I gave. So not really too much of a POGIL style there either. So again, you can have POGIL or not in the way that these are presented. It kind of depends on your goals. The POGIL stuff does take a little bit more time usually for students to work through. That's one of the complaints often with the POGIL is that we can't get as much material covered, but the opposite of that is what you do cover, they have a deeper understanding of. So again, what balance you're trying to strike there. Flipped classroom, what does the flipped part mean?
Do it outside, content outside, and then come to classroom prepared.
Exactly. So being working on your own outside and getting that content on your own outside the classroom. So blending those two is what I've done in taking the content outside of the class so that they're working on it independently. And sometimes, again, then that's through the development of the concept themselves and the understanding, but then also coming to class and having the benefit of that peer teaching and that group interaction. So again, those are primary then the key features. The outside, the inside, the classroom. Did you come across any other things that you thought were key features of this process? What happens outside and inside, obviously those are the big ones. Then the lesson guides are, again, definitely a key feature of the flipped classroom approach, the way that I do it. There was a question in here, and this gets to where flexibility exists. I primarily give lecture handouts, so I converted my lectures, my verbal lectures, into written lectures, and they have that. Is that necessary for the flipped classroom approach? Do we need to do it that way? Do you have to make your own lectures and give to them? Or can you give them the lecture material in some other format?
Well, you could just assign a section of the chapter.
Absolutely. So you don't have to go through all of the work that I did in presenting you know, the material in your own way. So you can have them watch videos if you like. You can have them go to websites. You can have them read sections of text. The reason I chose to have them read instead of watching videos is because I believe for the developmental learners, that's a skill they really need to develop, is reading for comprehension. And so they get much better at it as the class period goes on. One of the things with this approach that I always find interesting is that, you know, that first week there's a lot of apprehension, and the first week there's a lot of apprehension, and the second week they're figuring it out, but you know, still maybe not quite real good at it. But what happens is, you know, they're going through the lesson guides in the groups, and you can see it would be like, what is she? Where did this come from? What is that? And somebody else in the group will go, the answer's right here, and they'll point to it in the lesson handout. And so they're like, oh, okay. And so they start with each other to recognize, okay, maybe I need to read more carefully and for more detail, because a lot, again, when you're doing this lesson guide, one of the best practices is you need to make sure that you have those knowledge questions help them attain the knowledge, pull it out of there, even if it's just asking them to restate something, to redefine something, whatever, and then an application question. So you always need to make sure that they are picking up on the content. Okay, now do you understand the content? So point them to what to pick up, and then help them learn how that they should be processing and what to do with it. So again, those knowledge questions are always kind of interesting in the beginning. Just right there. Oh my God, I can't believe I missed that. So, flexibility. Where else? Well, besides the lecture, the way the lecture is presented, whether it's in written, verbal, video, whatever. What other ways would flexibility exist in the flipped classroom with the POGIL approach here?
Well, just like you had explained to me earlier that, if there's a concept that is not resonating with the students and are not grasping, you have the opportunity to do addendums to the material that you gave them or mini lectures to sort of drive home, so that option is kind of built into it also.
Yes, depending on the size of the class and just how well that they understood that material. Sometimes this is the only class I teach where sometimes they get out a little early because they're done and we've fully covered and we've done a review, and I feel like I should do a demonstration or something at that point because they're getting out early. In other semesters that doesn't happen. It very much depends. So there definitely is room for, if you need to spend more time on something, that room is there. And then some semesters I found, they always need more help on this. And then so I've taken those addendums that I give out occasionally, and they become part of the lesson guide, or maybe they are part 2 of a lesson guide, and I've learned that it needs to be done in a couple of steps. That's one of the things in putting a class together like this, that you just have to be open to recognizing you are going to make mistakes just like they make mistakes. And if you're like, this just didn't work out, I'm really sorry, they'll accept that, and that will endear you to them actually, and they kind of get a little bit more recognizing, oh well, this isn't perfect, but she really believes in this, and she's retrying. So be open to recognizing that sometimes things aren't going to work out the way you want, especially when you're first trying to do this and teaching it this way. So give yourself some flexibility in your schedule as well. The lesson guides themselves, what are the goals of the lesson guides?
Steer them through the material?
Absolutely, we want them to learn content, right? That's one thing, we definitely want them to learn content. But they're not just about the content. What else is a goal of the lesson guide?
To develop that critical thinking and application.
Absolutely. So in doing the lesson guide, you want to write the question, think about how you think about it, and write questions to help them down that path of thought. They need to help in learning how to think logically through things. From your best students down to your developmental students, that they definitely all can use help. And that's so in putting the lesson guides together, that is one of the things you're thinking about. How can I help them create those critical thinking skills? And for the developmental level, but I think actually at all levels too, they all just need help with study skills. So the idea of there's a section of text and maybe there's no real key critical points in that yet, but you want them to summarize that. That's a skill in itself. So if you want them to read something, you need to have a question associated with it. Otherwise, they won't read it. That I have definitely learned. They're going to skip right over it because some students read through the reading as you ask them to do, and then they go to the questions. A lot of students just go question and go try to find the answer. So if you want them to read it, you got to have a question associated with it. Even if it's just something as simple as what were the 2 steps listed, so at least they'll read that section. So we want them to learn content, but also to develop those critical thinking skills. So again, that's the goals of the lesson guides. And then the 2 formats in which they can present that. What are those 2 formats?
Integrated and separate.
The integrated and separate. So the one you have is that integrated, where the material and the questions are fully integrated. The separate is if you were having to watch a video or read in a text, then you would have all the questions separate instead of integrated. And like the one, I present my lectures sometimes in integrated, sometimes it still is that separate lecture with that, that handout lesson guide for them as well. So then that's another place, again, that flexibility does exist in the format. With the POGIL approach, it seems the integrated format is what I have gone to the most, because you want to lead them through that data then to the application and stuff like that. And often the data that, it was easiest just to contrive that data or create my own instead of trying, find something on a website. But you could do it that way as well. Look at the table in the book or find something on the website. But one of the things, again, if you want them to develop the process and get to the law or the theory or the concept themselves, if you have them read the textbook, then it's telling you what the law or the concepts or the theory is. And so it kind of depends. If the data chart you want them to look at and extract the information on is on a separate page from the actual law, then maybe it can work. But if the explanation and the data are sitting right there next together, they're just going to read the explanation, and working through that themselves isn't going to be there as much. So that's why I tend to go with the integrated approach. But again, finding data tables and things like that online would definitely be another thing that you could do to spark that kind of POGIL approach. Best practices for optimizing effectiveness. Things that you might have come up with, broad or specific, as you were looking through. There's quite a few smaller details that I have in the tips on how to put one of these together, and with those more specific details, but kind of some broader best practices. I think I've probably named a couple of them already.
You mentioned like doing the knowledge and then the application question.
Yeah, absolutely. You want to make sure that they know what they're supposed to know, and then try to help them to understand how to apply that.
I don't know if it's in here, but I would say getting students the buy-in part, I think.
Yep, the buy-in is from the beginning, and that's why I put that in here as well, because that buy-in and compliance is really big. You have to be, you have to believe in what you're doing if you want your students to believe in what you're doing, and you have to portray that. One of the issues I had with the POGIL approach, and some instructors can do it very well and other ones can't, is trying, as I said, to pepper it throughout the semester instead of it just be in the class. And it's tougher to get the buy-in from the students, at least for me it was, and just occasionally doing it. And that's why it was like, it's an all or nothing for me, I think, to make this work. So that buy-in is important as well. Anything else that you guys came up with for some best practices? Just one of the things, as you look through this, you can see that I have a variety of question types. So mix it up. There's a note in here about essays. You don't want to use them too much because that's kind of a free-for-all for students, especially if you really want them to, it's a concept they have to build on. You want to make sure they get that information before they move on. In an essay question, they might not get it. So you want to reserve essay questions for things like that. But you also need to build in that discussion, make sure there's rooms that discussion is going to happen in the classroom, and it's not just, oh, well, obviously this is true and this is false and things like that. So it's good to have some questions where certainly the answer is obvious, because you want them to get through the worksheet, that lesson guide, successfully on their own and get that material, the vast majority of it on their own before they come to class. And then it's the details and things like that that then they would work out during the group. So having a variety of questions to allow for making sure they get it, but also allowing for maybe a little uncertainty, so that does foster that discussion that will help with that deeper understanding. Again, if you want them to read it, make sure that you have a question associated with it. And this idea of scaffolding, it's huge in primary and secondary education, the scaffolding. Kind of show them how to do it and then give them blanks to fill in for things, for example. That is a straight scaffolding approach. Another thing would be just similar to what I've done with the thought process laying out how to think logically. Where was that one that I wrote that one? Oh, it's actually in the lesson guide, one of the on page 11. You know, number 12, use the concepts of valence, ionization, and energy to explain such and such. And this versus that. So that's what I have there, the explanation, and that's a scaffolded explanation. So here's the full, you know, from A to B to C logical flow of thought. And so then now you do it for the covalent, I did it for you for the ionic. So that's another way to scaffold, is, you know, laying that out for them. Another really good approach to that is writing something up, trying to get them to understand logic, because they make leaps in logic a lot. So write up an explanation that has leaps in logic, those common mistakes people make. And some you might need to make it a little bit more obvious sometimes than what theirs are, but ask them where that leap in logic has been made or where the mistake in reasoning is and those sorts of things. So asking them to look for mistakes is a great way to teach as well. And so how about some pros and cons to using this approach in your own classroom?
I think it would be stressful, bring their adrenaline up, make them remember, so we kind of thought that was a positive thing.
So, and the stress level is up in the beginning, but one of the things I find is that the students actually come to class much more relaxed. I have more of a relationship with the students in that class than I tend to, even earlier, you know, than the others because of the group and be walking around and interacting with the groups and things like that. And they're getting to work with their peers, and they always enjoy that as well. So now the quizzes each week bring up the stress level, but those, you know, they're doing a lot of group work. So I think individual, you know, those individual assessments on a regular basis are important to make sure that they're not relying on their group all the time as well, that they understand it is individual learning that must happen to be successful in the class overall. And the group is there to help you reach that individual understanding. So, other pros and cons?
We thought that it appealed to the different types of learners.
A lot of, especially in my non-majors class, I see that, you know, they like to do group work and stuff like that. The science majors class, I haven't done it in that class, and that's the class I am looking to maybe do next with this strategy. But they tend to resist. So they tend to resist group work a little bit more than the other ones because personality type going into science does usually tend to be more independent type personalities. But in science, it's teamwork anymore. It's all about teamwork. So, you know, that's recognizing that that's important. And the other thing that really comes out that's a benefit to the whole group thing, no matter how you do the class, is that using vocabulary. They have to talk, they have to use the vocabulary. I mean, chemistry is an entire language all of its own, and the more that they use the terms and the terminology, and they can get it right, because if they're using them wrong, people are going to be like, I'm not following you know, so it really helps them with their precision and understanding of the actual terms themselves. So the group work, I think, is important in that respect. About out of time. Do you guys have any questions about what I do or how this might apply to your own classroom?
Do you have assigned groups, Serena, or do you switch them up all the time? Do you see certain needs in a group where one group is strong versus a weak and then mix it? You know, do you do that?
I've tried everything, and it very much depends. What I kind of like to do is the first couple of weeks is I shift them around a lot, and I do it randomly by counting or something, depends on how big your classroom is, what you might choose to do. So they get to know more people in the class. But then it kind of settles in, especially after that first test, I usually assign a group, and they stick with that group. This past semester, the groups were not functional. Like, they just weren't going well at all. It was the wrong, so after the test, it was after the second test, that I sat down and really specifically assigned the people who were doing really well in the class and people who were doing poorly, and those who were obviously good at leading groups and things like that. And I was very specific in the way I made the groups, and it improved things dramatically. Other semesters, it's been perfectly fine being random every class, because I had one class that the number of students there actually kind of changed often for a period. There was lots of people had things going on. And so every class period, it was a different group, and that worked fine for them. So that's something, be open to changing that up. The roles, the POGIL, I actually forgot about the roles in the POGIL classroom until I started, doing this again. I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot about those. The reason I tried doing those at the beginning, and those just seemed to, it was just too much, I think, for me and the students to try to figure this out and understand what their roles are and things like that. And so I think the roles can be good if they're used all the time, but I haven't found really the need for them in the classroom so much in my classroom. That's why I haven't done them.
What's been the most rewarding outcome you've seen by students by using this process versus a more traditional lecture-based process?
People like chemistry. They enjoy learning about chemistry and they get it. And I mean, I definitely had people who could, where I was able to bring to an understanding through lecture and getting it, and I had that before, but so much more now. And especially this class is a developmental class. 90% of the people who come into this class are scared to death of chemistry. And so, again, that's one of the things. They're a little nervous about the group. They think they want me to lecture, but the fact that they're with their peers primarily helps them as well be more comfortable. And there's less formality when you're walking around as the instructor with the groups. And then they're talking and they're learning, and sometimes somebody's explaining something to them, and sometimes they're the ones that's explaining something to somebody else. And there's always in every class, even the person at the bottom of the grade scale, at some point during the class is the one teaching somebody else, and that's big, and that's a confidence builder, and that's something that they need, is that confidence. So that's been the biggie, is the confidence building and the enjoyment of the subject material.
Nice.
And on the very last page, on the back, I haven't done the stats on this yet. This is just kind of a comparison of when I did straight lecture versus doing this more lesson guide flipped approach. And I don't know if things are statistically significant. The top is every semester I've done it, and the bottom is I knocked out that first semester, because the first semester of teaching and the first semester of teaching this format were both kind of, I had 40% to 50% failure rates. Just people mostly withdrawing is what it was. And so I was curious as to what the difference was when I took that first semester out. But in both formats, it was the same thing. That first year, you're a little less comfortable with it. You're not as sure. So the students aren't as sure as well, and they ended up dropping. But so you can see there's a difference. 70% success rate, which is defined as a C or greater, versus a 59% success rate with the lecture format that I had before. So, I've seen an improvement, and definitely you can see there is a big difference in the number of people who are getting that A level for sure. So you had a lot of people move into that A category and really just getting it. So it was a benefit for, I'd say, that kind of average student really took them to that next level. But you can see the failure or the withdrawal rates and stuff. It helped those students as well. The ones that were maybe not quite as strong as students also improved them. Again, I'm not sure if there's statistical significance there yet, but that's the data as it stands. Well, thank you for coming today. If you do have any other questions, on the what to do section, it says after the section, I would really encourage you to, if you're interested in this approach at all, or even if you're not interested in an approach, read through, because there's a lot, 10 years of learning with students, and what has it been, 6 years of doing this approach, and what has worked and what hasn't worked with my students, and a lot of that's given in the tips, but also just in the format of the way this is done. You can really see, when you read through the details and go through the questions, you start to understand more of like, oh, I see what you did there, kind of thing. So, okay, thank you for coming today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.